I dug through my mess of stock wire harness and I found the oil pressure sensor plug, and I cut it off, and it's these three wires here, and I basically just extended them, and right now I just got it draped across the engine so we can test it real quick. And we're up at the stock S10 oil pressure sensor that I installed in the other video. Just tapped it into that block. Then we're going to plug it in. That's what the stock plug looks like. Now we'll test it out, see what happens. Put the key forward. That's a good sign, because before it was going like way over to the side, or I don't remember, one of the sides. It wasn't going to zero. So now we'll start the engine. Looks good. That's right about where it should be. 25-30 psi, somewhere in there. Give it a quick little rev. I'd say that works pretty good. So that's pretty easy. Just extend those wires out and plug it in. So now I'll get these wires loomed up and find a better pathway. Obviously this was just for testing, so get that cleaned up and move on to the coolant temperature sensor. Working on the coolant temperature sensor, and we finally get to do some troubleshooting. This was going too easy, I was worried. So here's my temperature sensor connector and the whole floppy harness. So it uses, stock S10 uses a 3-pin sensor. There's a couple different styles. Most are 2-pin for a lot of cars, but for whatever reason we got a 3-pin. So the way these normally work is one of the pins is 12 volts, one is ground, and one is the signal wire. The way the coolant temperature sensor works is as the temperature changes, it's a variable resistor inside, and it changes the resistance, and then the computer or whichever gauge translates that from voltage to temperature. That makes sense. So we're looking for three things. We're looking for power, ground, and then the third one's just our signal. So first we're going to check this green wire, and the green wire I've already traced, and it goes back to that main connector that's normally above the brake booster. So that wire is not broken, and it goes to inside to the gauges. So first we'll check that green wire. I've got my meter set on DC. And it's 12 volts. So that should be good, because we were looking for a 12. And the yellow wire is 1 volt, which just could be like some bleed over voltage. And then the black wire is basically 0. So next we'll check the black wire for ground. And the black wire should be the ground, it normally is. So go on our black wire, touch ground, and we have really high resistance. I don't know if you can see that, but it is got a little M up right there. And that means we got like 8 million ohms, which is basically infinite resistance. And we'll just double check with our yellow wire to make sure that's not the ground. And the yellow wire is not the ground. So the yellow wire should be going to the gauges. So what that tells me is that the black wire needs to be ground. So in this mess, I've got the original grounds taped off somewhere. Alright, and then we will check our black wire. It's one of these, and that's what we're looking for, no resistance. We'll check it to the other one. A lot of times they're all connected internally. Yep, so they're both connected. So I need to ground these. And then we'll try our, come on, what are you doing? So I'm going to connect these to ground real quick, and then we'll check our sensor again. Okay, I got my grounds connected. We'll check for resistance to ground from the black wire again. And to test this, I'm just going to hit the sensor with a little bit of fire. The minimum gauge reading is 100 degrees, so I just need to get this above 100. So I connected my grounds, made sure everything was good, double checked my wiring, gauge wasn't working still. So I was sitting there thinking like, maybe the computer needs power, maybe the computer does a calculation, who knows what. Then I remembered that most of these coolant sensors are case grounded, meaning that the actual brass part needs to be grounded for the resistance to work correctly. I had it just hanging out in space. So first rule of troubleshooting is the guy before you was an idiot, and in this case I was the idiot. So I've got it sitting on the head now. I'm going to heat it up again. Doesn't need much. And then we'll go see if this gauge moved. So there we go. Gauge is reading. Right now that sensor is cooling off, so that's why you see it going down. All that aluminum's just soaking all that heat right out of it. Alright, so that's the wiring. Wiring's good. So now I just need to make the sensor fit the engine. On the right here is the stock S10 temperature sensor. And this was pretty standard in the 80s and 90s for GM, where it was a tapered, just a MPT thread, so it seals on the threads itself. And then in the late 90s they switched to this type of fitting, which is just a straight thread and then it seals with a washer. And this is what comes on the LS engines, and that's what the LS heads are tapped for. So what I'm going to do is turn this down to this thread instead of buying an adapter. You can buy adapters. There's a bunch of ways to do it. You could drill and tap into your radiator hose if you have an aluminum spacer in it or anything, or you could drill and tap right into your water pump or anything like that and drill and tap for this. But I'd like to run it in the rear of the passenger head, and I'd like for it to just thread right in. So I'll be turning this into this. I have it turned down to the major diameter of the threads. Now I'll take my relief cut. Now we'll turn those threads down to match. Alright, threads are cut. I'm going to give myself a little more relief cut back here, and then we'll find a washer and put this in. Next time you're at your favorite Chinese junk store, pick you up one of these little boxes. This thing is a lifesaver. It's got a whole bunch of copper washers in it, all different sizes. Great for when you're doing brakes. I like to use these on any transmission fittings that usually come with those crappy Teflon or rubber O-rings, or things like this where you're sealing up against aluminum. So that's about the right size. And these are standard sizes, but they work on metric stuff. It's close enough. So go screw this in. Alright, so this definitely was not fun to install, but you can see it way tucked in there, right there. I got my water temp sensor on the passenger side in the rear. You just pull that little plug out, screw it in, plug it in, and she's ready to go. So now I got all four of my information gauges working, two over there, two over here. Last one's going to be the speedometer. So that one I'm going to need to figure out where to tie in the signal coming into the dash. I should be able to wire it just one wire directly to the dash and then manipulate the data in HP tuners. So that's it.